Hey guys, and welcome back to the BnG podcast. Welcome back to episode 3. So like I promised in episode 2, today we're going to be doing a defensive breakdown or a defensive outlook as for our outlook for the 2021 season. It's going to be similar to our offensive breakdown where we'll be looking at position groups. We'll be looking at some players who may be leaving, some players that we'll be looking to re-sign, and some players that we may be actually signing as free agents, unrestricted or restricted. But first, I want to go over some news that has happened since our last podcast. So, of course, if you're an NFL fan, you guys have heard about the Matt Stafford trade, where the Detroit Lions actually traded Matthew Stafford to the Los Angeles Rams for a slew of picks, multiple first rounders, and even more. And you guys have also heard the reports, especially my friends in the Washington football team community. Washington was one of the leaders in the race until, the Rams pulled that magic trick out the hat, giving all the picks. And I'm kind of glad that Washington didn't go all in as LA did, because as you see, LA doesn't really value their first round picks as much as I think they should. And it's come to spurn them in their playoffs. They don't make the deep runs as they expected. They traded 2 first round picks for Jalen Ramsey, and it's spurned them. But I guess they haven't learned their lesson yet because they went all in for Matthew Stafford. Hopefully, not me as a Redskin fan. I don't want to see them win the Super Bowl, but hopefully, their riches turn to whatever they're looking for as far as their fortune, because they've had bad luck and they seem to keep selling these first round picks that don't seem to be worth much to them. So the Redskins didn't go, or the Washington football team, didn't go all in on Matthew Stafford. So he's now a Los Angeles Ram. And then today, we're actually recording this podcast on February 4th. So yesterday, on February 3rd, Martin Mayhew and Marty Hurney actually had their first press conference as our new general manager and our new VP, or our executive VP of player personnel. It was a joint press conference over Zoom, and I really liked the tone and what them guys were saying in the press conference. Coach Rivera was in the press conference as well. He was in a separate location, but he was on the same Zoom line or the same Zoom call. I just like the tone and the overall message that was given in the press conference. They were preaching continuity, something that I was preaching in episode 1, was a lot of organizational continuity. Ron said that, he had came to a crossroads where he wanted to hire both Hurney and Mayhew because they interviewed so well. And then he actually took it to owner Dan Snyder, and he was the one that actually proposed, why not hire them both? Why not have them both work together? And I see that, while I am worried a tad bit about having too many hands in the kitchen, and I was, a lot more worried than I was when I watched the press conference, I do think after leaving the press conference, I do see a path for organizational alignment. One of the things that was stressed a lot in the press conference was that this is still a coach-centric approach or coach-centric organization. And so Coach Rivera is still going to have the final say on personnel moves, who comes in, who comes out, even moves all the way up that trickle down into the front office. This is still Coach Rivera's show. I think that both Mayhew and Hurney, showed a understanding of that and show that they appreciate the fact that they're on board and able to work together. From what I got from the press conference is that Coach Rivera even slipped up and called them, both the GMs. But what I got is that I think that Marty Hurney is going to be more on the college side, doing more scouting, which I've heard that he loves to do. He loves being on the road. He's an excellent college scout from what I've heard. And then I think from what I've heard from the press conference, from what I got from the press conference as well, is that Marty Hurney will be, not Marty Hurney, Martin Mayhew will actually be dealing with, the professional side of ball, the schematic fits, who are we signing in free agency, and things like that. So overall, I like the tone and the message that we got from the press conference, and I'm starting to see the, organizational alignment that I was talking about looking for in episode 1. So that's enough for that news. Time to get to our defensive breakdown. So like I said, guys, this is going to be like our offensive breakdown where we're just going to be looking at the position groups and we're going to be breaking them down. We're going to look at some free agents that maybe potentially become Washington football team members in the future in 2021. And then we'll look forward to our next episode where we'll be giving you guys a lot of draft coverage leading up to the NFL draft. So we'll be giving you a free agent outlook as well as a draft outlook coming up. up. But for right now, episode 3, Bleeding BnG, this is our defensive outlook. So like I said, we're going to do our position breakdowns first. I'm not going to spend too much time on the defensive line. The same thing with the offensive line from episode 2. But this is a different reason. Everybody in the country, everybody that's an NFL fan knows about the Washington front four at this point. In 2020, they possessed 5 first-round picks, all that played on the defensive line. In 2021, I don't expect Ryan Kerrigan to be back. Even in his exit interview and interviews that he's done, he's speaking as if he played his last game as a Washington football team member. So that may be one of the first round draft picks that we lose, but we're still extremely stout up front, and we're still tremendously talented up front. Our 4 projected starters coming in the next season: Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, and Chase Young. They proved that they were as advertised in 2020. Those guys stepped up big time. Especially, I know that Chase Young got a lot of notoriety, and I know that edge rushers are a little more sexy, but Payne and Allen stepped up big time in Matt Ioannidis' absence after he got hurt in week 2 against the Arizona Cardinals. And those two actually led all defensive tackles. They were 1 and 2. Listen to that. 2 Washington football team defensive tackles led the league. They were number 1 and number 2 in run stops from the position in 2020, with Daron Payne actually leading the NFL with 33, and then Jonathan Allen coming behind him with 30. So you got those defensive tackles, that Alabama wall, they were as advertised in 2020, and I expect them to be even better in 2021. So then we go to our sack brothers, Chase Young and Montez Sweat. Chase Young, as I mentioned in episode 1, he was everything as advertised. This weekend coming up, I expect him to be named the Defensive Rookie of the Year. He had 7.5 sacks. He had multiple forced fumbles. He even had a touchdown score. And then, his partner on the other side, Montez Sweat, even had more sacks than Chase Young. He had 9 sacks, and he was really coming into his own. He showed that he was a strong run defender, containing the edge. I believe that he was probably Washington's best run defender because he was consistent game in and game out. If you guys didn't pay attention, Montez Sweat is a beast against the run. He uses those long arms, to stack and shed, and he makes a play. Montez Sweat, even though he has like a thin frame, even though he's a huge dude, but for his size, he has a thin frame. He was a beast against the run this year. And then to go with those numbers that I mentioned off earlier with Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen, I just expect them to keep building upon that into the 2021 season. And then the best thing about this, guys, is Matt Ioannidis is coming back. And then the other best thing that's about this is Matt Ioannidis is our oldest player, and he's only 27 years old. I believe that Matt Ioannidis is still our best interior pass rusher. He showed that in 2019. I think he had like 8 sacks from the 3-4 defensive end position, which is insane because those guys are known to like take up space and things like that. But Matt Ioannidis proved his worth in 2019, which earned himself a big contract. Even though he did get hurt in 2020, that's just adding on to the embarrassment of riches, because that front 4, even though Matt Ioannidis did go down, they stepped their game up once he did, and they got the national recognition. Whether that was the bat passes they had against the Steelers, or whether that was them dominating the game against the San Francisco 49ers. The one thing that does concern me a little bit is that teams that did want to run the ball on Washington, they did, and those numbers from PFF that I mentioned with the run stop leaders, that kind of throws me off a little bit, because I did see, when teams, were determined to run the ball, like San Francisco in the first half, or like the Seattle Seahawks, or like the Giants in the second meeting with them this past season. They were able to run the ball whenever they wanted, so that does concern me a little bit. So hopefully, that was just a more technique thing, getting used to the scheme, because they did buckle down later in the season against the run. So hopefully they can continue to improve on that. But as far as from a pass rushing standpoint, I believe that this is the best defensive front in the league, and they showed it for the most part last year. Top 2 in the league in sacks, and then you bring back somebody like Matt Ioannidis, who, like I said, I believe is the best interior pass rusher. It's only up from there. So I don't expect them to do too much in the offseason as far as the defensive line position. I know with trade packages with Deshaun Watson, a lot of our media outlets and our local beat writers, they're mentioning like some of the defensive line may be available in the package along with picks. And I understand that because we have this embarrassment of riches. So whether that be a Matt Ioannidis, you guys, we have to give up somebody if we want somebody as dynamic or quarterback as dynamic as Deshaun Watson. So I would understand that. The only people that would be untouchable on my defensive line is Chase Young and maybe Montez Sweat. But everybody else, and that's because of the position they play. Edge rusher is one of the most important positions in the NFL or in football, period, behind quarterback, cornerback, and left tackle. But, I put a priority on edge rushers and edge players, and I believe that we have the best bookend edge defenders in the league. So I would want to keep those together so that those sack brothers, as we deemed them throughout the season, can keep that continuity and become the force that we all know them to be. So if we did have to give away somebody, I wouldn't be opposed to giving away, either Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, or Matt Ioannidis in a Deshaun Watson trade, but that would only be in a trade for Deshaun Watson. Anybody else, I don't want them. Not for those players. Not for them. Let's just work out with that dominant front four and the quarterback position, may fall where it lies, whether that be in a draft, whether that be in free agency, whether we trade for somebody. But the only person that I'll be giving up one of these defensive linemen for, these 5 amazing defensive linemen, including Tim Settle, is only Deshaun Watson. And speaking of Tim Settle, he may be due for an extension this offseason. Tim Settle was actually top 5 in the league as far as interior rushers and sack percentage, and that's assured because he doesn't play as many play as many snaps as a lot of the top guys, and he's rotating. But that shows that when Tim Settle is in the game, he's always being a force, and he's always, he's never a liability. To be top 5 in the NFL or something is special in its own right. So that's it for the defensive line. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on them because we know, or we should know as well, Washington football team community, how dominant our defensive front is and how good that we have it there. So I did want to go to the linebackers, though. And I know I mentioned how if teams wanted to run the ball on Washington at times last year, they could. And I believe that a lot of that was due to the linebackers. And the numbers back it up. You don't get 2 defensive tackles that, are leading the NFL in run stops. But, teams are able to run the ball as much as they wanted to against Washington. And I believe that's due to, our linebackers not filling gaps. Our linebackers not getting off blocks in time. Our linebackers making a lot of misreads. I'm looking at you, John Bostic. Making a lot of misreads, taking a lot of false steps. And so what I did see, the linebacker play improve after, Coach Rivera even called them out during the season. Coach Del Rio even called them out during the season. So that shows me that my eyes are seeing the right thing because the coaches validated that in their press conferences. So I did see a lot of improvement after, they were called out, but there's still a lot more room for improvement. Personally, out of the 3 linebackers that started on a consistent basis last year, out of KPL, John Bostic, and Cole Holcomb, I believe that Cole Holcomb is the only one that deserves a starting position last year. For next year, this past season in 2020, when he played, Cole Holcomb was all over the field. He was flying to the ball. He was good in coverage. He had when he took on Zeke in the backfield and knocked Zeke out, like Cole Holcomb stepped up. The pick that he had on Zeke, Cole Holcomb was a man when he was out there on the field. And to think that he wasn't even starting at the beginning of the season, that is an issue. I know I said that we should trust Coach Del Rio and Coach Rivera, but that was an issue for me because it was evident as soon as he stepped on the field that Cole Holcomb was the best linebacker on our roster. We out here force-feeding dudes like Sean Dion Hamilton, who's no longer on the roster, who's a Detroit Lion now, and Thomas Davis, who has no good knees anymore and is, nearly 40. We out here giving these guys positions over Cole Holcomb. That was the one thing that irked me at the beginning of the season. Because if you remember back to 2019, Cole showed a lot of those same qualities, flying to the ball. Yes, he did have trouble getting off a lot of blocks in 2019, but he improved, and he showed tremendous improvement in that in 2020. So that's why I think that he has earned himself a starting spot in 2021. I would like to see KPL brought back. Both him and John Bostic are upcoming free agents. I would like to see KPL brought back and and he can battle it out for a starting position, but I would like to see him, have some competition in training camp. So at the very least, that if he doesn't win that position, he's providing depth. I like KPL in coverage. KPL was pretty good in coverage when he was healthy. He struggled when he came back from that high ankle sprain, but KPL shut off a lot of those passes to the flats, and he was pretty good in coverage when he was healthy, but he was a liability against the run. I remember vividly, his worst game was probably against the Ravens. If you guys go back and look at that Ravens game, there were a whole bunch of cutback lanes because KPL was hesitant and not pressing the gap or not pressing the hole. And I just saw that too consistent out of KPL. And KPL is somebody who's been a career backup. He did have a breakout season in 2019, filling in for Roquan Swift. That's what sparked Ron and Jack's interest in bringing him here. So he's not a bad player by any means, but I did see what's keeping him from being a consistent starter week in and week out, because he does possess a lot of freaky traits, and his physical profile is off the charts. But I do see some of the tangible football skills that he's lacking that cause him to be a career backup and a journeyman. KPL's been on a lot of teams. I know the Seahawks off the top of my head. I mentioned the Bears already, as well as the Chiefs. So, maybe they saw what we saw as the season went on, that he was a liability against the run. But I would like to see KPL brought back as a Washington football team member in 2021. John Bostic, not so much. I believe, his time is up as a Washington football player. Thank you for his time of service, but I believe that we can get a lot better at the middle linebacker position. And that leads me to my next point. So we're going to go over some free agent linebackers that can potentially be brought in to be potential Washington football team members. So first, I want to talk about Jarrad Davis. Jarrad Davis is a linebacker from the University of Florida. He spent his first 4 seasons with the Detroit Lions, and he's going to be entering his age 26 season. The reason that I think that Jarrad Davis may potentially end up as a Washington football team member is because he actually played with Jack's son, Luke Del Rio, in college. Luke was actually the quarterback of those Florida teams. And I don't know if you guys remember when Jarrad Davis was coming out, a lot of us wanted him in the first round. He was a special talent coming out of Florida, sideline to sideline linebacker who's had his fair share of injuries while playing in Detroit. But we also have to consider the situation that he was playing in as well. He's playing under Matt Patricia. Nobody, as you see once he got fired, nobody loved playing under Matt Patricia. He was confusing the guys a lot on the defense. So Jarrad Davis has started his career out slow. He started his rookie year. He came out guns a-blazing, but he has tapered off since then. So hopefully, in a new area, a new team, he can regain that form that made him that physical freak that we can remember from those Florida defenses when he was rocking the 4-0. So I do think that Jarrad Davis can be a great potential pickup as a Washington football team player. And like I said, if he can battle it out with KPL, or, if he wins that out, he can start alongside Cole Holcomb. The next person I want to bring up is a middle linebacker, is Denzel Perriman. He is a heavy hitter. One of those things that I mentioned about KPL is that, he was hesitant pressing a lot of gaps, causing a lot of backside runs to hit, especially against the Seahawks, and especially against the Seahawks, if my memory serves correctly. But a guy like Denzel Perriman, while he is a liability in coverage, he's a heavy hitter. He's going to press that gap. He's going to hit you in the mouth. He's going to get that, impact tackle for loss. I'm not saying that he's a great, Ray Lewis type player by any means, because like I did say, he's a liability in coverage, but he is somebody that's going to hit you in the mouth, and that's what I need in my middle linebacker position. Like I said, he struggles in coverage, but he's somebody that has experience calling plays. He has somebody that has experience calling the defense, being the leader of a defense. So while he did see his time decrease and his snaps decrease during his time with the Chargers, hey, like a Jarrad Davis, maybe a change of scenery will help him as well. And lastly, this is one that I haven't seen really talked about in the Washington football team community. I can see a scenario where Washington trades for Carolina Panther linebacker Shaq Thompson. Now, a lot of you guys, especially in the Washington football team community, remember Shaq Thompson from getting that Heisman to the face from Darius Geis in the 2019 season. But Shaq Thompson is a pretty good player. He's a jack of all trades linebacker that's able to play both the strong and the will. And he's a pretty dynamic athlete coming out of Washington. When he was getting drafted, he actually played safety and a little bit of running back as well. So Shaq Thompson is a dynamic athlete, and he's actually one of Marty Hurney's draft picks from his time as a GM of the Carolina Panthers. So I see where a trade for Shaq Thompson could be potentially made this offseason. And if it happens, I want you guys to give BnG his credit. Say that you guys heard it here first. That Shaq Thompson Washington football team acquisition, if it does happen. Shaq Thompson just signed a contract extension at the end of the 2019 season, so his base salary will be around $10.1 million next year, which is kind of a big of a hit for the linebacker position. But like I said in the offensive outlook episode, we have cap space. We're either 7th or 8th, depending on which site you look at, as far as available cap space, and we can shed even more if we get Alex Smith off our contract. So I believe that somebody like Shaq Thompson can help this defense as well. He had over 100 tackles playing in the college-style 3-3-5 defense that the Carolina Panthers just played this past year. So I think that he can really aid this defense. And if Shaq Thompson's getting traded for, he's coming in as a starter. Whether I think he can be gotten for a 3rd or 4th round pick, or maybe both. But I don't want to give up too much draft capital. But I think look out for a potential Shaq Thompson trade. That's all I'm gonna say about that. That's all. I'm connecting the dots. I'm seeing these relationships, dotting my T's and crossing my I's. So let's just be on the lookout for a potential Shaq Thompson trade in the offseason. Now, as far as the draft, the draft is really weak at the linebacker position this year. Not edge, not talking about the edge defenders, but stand up traditional 4-3 strong will and Mike linebackers. The draft is really weak. But I have identified 2 targets that I can potentially see becoming Washington football team members, and both of them would have to be gotten with that 19th pick in the 1st round if we don't trade that pick. And the 2 players that I've identified is Zaven Collins. He is 6'4", 260 pounds, out of the University of Tulsa. In 8 games this season, he had 54 combined tackles, 36 solo tackles, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 4 interceptions. And if you can tell by those measures that I just read off, Collins is a freak of an athlete. 6'4", 260 pounds, he would automatically be the biggest linebacker in the NFL. And he moves like a freak. He is tremendous in coverage. When I was reading off those stats, he had 4 interceptions in 8 games from the linebacker position. He moves like a ballerina. I've never seen it. I've never seen anything like it from the linebacker position. He's about Chase Young size playing middle linebacker. That's freaky. That's so freaky. And then for him to have 4 sacks, 4 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, that shows that he's a jack of trade player, and he's big time. He outperformed his college. Tulsa isn't a powerhouse, but he was putting them on a national map. He was getting ESPN features because they saw this huge linebacker should not be moving like this. He is a freak athlete. So I can see, Zaven Collins potentially, being that pick at 19, especially like I said in episode 1. Coach Rivera and Coach Del Rio, they're linebackers at hearts, guys. They play linebacker in the NFL, both of them. So they know good linebacker play when they see it. And Zaven Collins, to me, is a good linebacker. And the other person or the other player that I identified that can potentially be selected at 19 is out of Notre Dame. His name is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He is 6'1", 220 pounds, so he's pretty light, but he is a freak athlete as well. So these guys, they have different, dimensions and different measurables. But the one thing that I can say are similar between both guys are that they are freak athletes. Koramoah had 55 combined tackles, 42 solo tackles, 1.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 interception in 12 games. And he played with a stacked Notre Dame defense. So he was out there making plays with other guys. He was out there battling guys, who gonna get this tackle first. And when Koramoah hits you, when JOK, as they call him at Notre Dame, or as they call him throughout the nation, when JOK hits you, you feel it. I remember watching a spotlight during college game day where actually one of the professors, I'm not sure if it was from Notre Dame or another school, was actually doing physics formulas to kind of, comprehend how hard JOK was hitting these players. He delivers that knockout blow. He's gonna be, I'm not comparing anybody to the late great Sean Taylor, but you guys remember when Sean Taylor used to smack somebody, that would change the dynamic of the defense. That would change the tempo of the game. This guy, and I don't put too many people up next to the late great Sean, but this guy, as far as an impact hitter, this guy brings it with him. Like I said, he's only 6'1", 220 pounds. But he is a freak as far as, just bringing that wood when he's coming downhill. He will knock you out. He will hit you in the mouth. I would love if JOK slid to 19 because, like I said, he's a jack of all trades player as well. He can play the will linebacker. He can play the big nickel. He can play the Buffalo position that they had Cam Curl playing earlier in the year because he's that freaky of an athlete. And you won't lose anything in the run game either. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, that was the weakest point of our defense. So imagine if you're able to, swap out a DB and sub packages and put in JOK or slide over JOK and then put another linebacker to replace JOK's position when he's filling in the base defense. That helps you against the run tremendously, and something that I would like to see. So Zaven Collins and JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, are two players that I've identified that I actually like. If Washington doesn't go the quarterback route in the draft at 19. So next, we're going to actually look at the secondary. We're going to look at the cornerbacks and the safety position. I'm not going to spend too much time on the cornerback position because my mind is made up. We need to re-sign Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby, gave you a bargain on a 1-year prove-it deal, and he proved it. He was top 3 in the NFL in pass deflection. And in my opinion, he's one of the top 3 corners on the market right now, whether that be Pat P, who's pretty much washed up, or Shaquille Griffin. Whichever way you want to group him. Ronald Darby, Shaquille Griffin, and Patrick Peterson are my top 3 cornerbacks on the market. And as Ron mentioned in his press conference, he said one of his priorities after the quarterback position is taking care of his guys. So this is one of the players you need to take care of. Ronald Darby, he stepped up. He had a breakout season. I know a lot of people in the Washington football team community, they hated the signing. They remember Terry torching him in 2019. Well, we don't remember Ronald Darby getting torched too many times in 2020, do we? No, because it didn't happen. Ronald Darby stepped it up. He proved it. Like I said, he gave you a 1-year prove it deal, and he proved it. So these are the type of guys that you reward. I know that Darby loves playing at home as well. So even if we get like a little bit of a discount, but he is going to get top of the market money. Because like I said, Ronald Darby's one of the top 3 cornerbacks on the market, whether you believe it or not. He is. Based off his 2020 play, he's one of the top quarterbacks on the market. And we might have to, we might have to give him the bag. Because he certainly outplayed his contract in 2020. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the cornerback position because you guys now know my stance. It's either Ronald Darby or, if we don't get Darby, I would be very disappointed. But hopefully, at that point, we may look at somebody in the draft. But I don't want to spend too much of our free agency dollars on the quarterback position unless it's on Ronald Darby. So let's look at our safeties. I do think that we have a need at free safety. I love DeShazer Everett as much as the next man. He's one of those impact hitters as well. And we saw his impact in the Dallas game and the San Francisco game, knocking Mostert out. But I believe he's more of a depth backup player, somebody that you play in 3 safety sets. Likewise for Jeremy Reeves. I believe that they're the same type of players. So I don't think that you need both of those guys on the roster. I think that's why, Jeremy Reeves was on the practice squad until we got so many injuries at the safety position. Because having him and DeShazer Everett on the roster at the same time seemed pretty redundant. So I do believe that we can, we're in the market for a free safety. And then I listed some free safeties from free agency that I would like, that I can see potentially being Washington football team players. The first one is Justin Simmons. He is number one on my free agent safeties ranking. He will be entering his age 28 season in 2020. He had 96 tackles and 5 interceptions. And Justin Simmons is just a ball hawk. No, he's not the best tackler, but he'll give you the range that you've been missing in your defense. While I love Cam Curl and I love his versatility, I don't think he's the rangiest of safeties. I think that he can, he's interchangeable. He can play both, free safety and strong safety, but I believe that when he's back there in the free safety and he's over top, hovering defense, that's when you got to play a lot of too high because he doesn't have the range to cover sideline to sideline. Justin Simmons, while he's not a burner or a freak athlete, he's shown to possess that range because of his natural instincts as a ball hawk. And like I said, he had 5 interceptions in what was a down year for that Denver Broncos defense. And then moving on to Anthony Harris. Anthony Harris is entering his age 30 season. He's a local guy, though, coming from the University of Virginia. In 2020, he had 104 tackles. He didn't have any interceptions, which is shocking after leading the league in interceptions in 2019, but he did have 6 pass deflections. So I like Anthony Harris. Anthony Harris is a pretty good player. That age kind of scares me because I know he's going to be looking at a big contract or a long contract that takes him to, age 34 and 35, something that I'm not, an advocate for or something that I'm really not feeling right now. I'm not feeling, signing old guys to long contracts. But the reports coming out of Minnesota is that he's looking for a pretty long and lucrative contract. So if he comes down on his price tag, I can see him, entertaining Washington, and I can see Washington having an interest in Anthony Harris as well. Third is Marcus May from the Jets. He's entering his age 27 season. Last season he had 88 tackles on that putrid Jets defense, and he also had 2 interceptions. Marcus May, he's a ball hawk as well. I know those 2 interceptions don't sound like it, but guys, we got to remember this New York Jets defense from last season. They didn't have a pass rush. They didn't have linebackers. They didn't have corners. So to get 2 interceptions on that defense is almost like an achievement. Marcus May out of Florida, he's somebody that attacks the ball. When they were pairing him up with Jamal Adams, he would play a lot of deep single high because, Jamal Adams plays like he's an edge rusher or a linebacker half of the time. So Marcus May was able to play a lot of single high, cover 3, cover 1 robber, cover 1 man, and make plays. And he made a lot of plays. When he was with the Jets. And this is one of the reasons why I can see him, and I would be an advocate for him potentially signing with the Washington football team. Because I think the one thing that we're missing in the secondary is a playmaker. I think that Cam Curl is that one guy, but I think we need another playmaker. I think you need 2 of your 4 base secondary guys to be playmakers that can get you the ball at any time. Like I said, Ronald Darby was top 3 in the league in pass deflections. He wasn't top 3 in the league in interceptions. So that shows that Darby got them DB hands. But, he was there to make the play. And if we can bring in somebody else that's capable of making those plays or has a knack for making those plays, that can even help our defense out even more. And then I wanted to give you guys a sneaky free agent pickup that, I would love. I would love if we brought this player in because I actually wanted us to draft him when he was coming out of Ohio State, and that is Malik Hooker. At this point, Malik Hooker is entering his age 25 season, and you may be able to get Malik Hooker with a bargain deal because of his injury history. He's coming off an ACL injury, which cut his he's coming off an Achilles injury, which cut his 2020 season short, but he also had an ACL injury as a part of his time with the Colts as well. So over the course of his rookie contract, Hooker did have 2 major injuries, but if you guys can remember the freak athlete and the range that Hooker displayed when he was at Ohio State. He displayed the same type of qualities when he was healthy with the Colts, but the problem is he just never was healthy. So hopefully, he can have a change of fortune with his health, and I would love to see Malik Hooker potentially sign with the Washington football team on a bargain deal. You put him and Cam Curl back there, and if he's, as close to 100% as he can be, or somebody can be sustaining those 2 major injuries, that can form a pretty formidable, safety duo with Hooker or with any of these guys, with Harris, Simmons, Hooker, May. If you pair that guy with Cam Curl, I think that that forms a pretty formidable safety duo, as I mentioned before. If you guys noticed, I keep bringing up Cam Curl's name because I believe that he surpassed Landon Collins as the starter. If Landon Collins is brought back to the Washington football team, which I think may not be the case, he shouldn't be starting over Cam Curl. And I don't think that you can play those two guys on the field at the same time, because neither of them possess the elite range or the elite speed to play over the top all game. Now, like I just mentioned, I think there may be, a scenario where Washington looks to get Landon Collins' contract off the books. He's a safety. He's playing in the secondary, and he's coming off an Achilles injury. And that, the fortune of that injury doesn't look good, especially for somebody who has to cut and plant, 24/7 in a game at the safety position. And then we must remember Landon wasn't playing great before that. So if we look at, him being fully 100% healthy and not playing great, what are we expecting if he's coming back from an Achilles injury? And I love Landon Collins as much as the next man. I love his admiration for Sean Taylor. I love, his initial press conference when he was brought in. I love Landon Collins at Alabama, but he simply hasn't performed to, his contract. He simply hasn't performed to the status of his contract up until this point. And I know that injuries suck, but, he might have got wildly picked by Cam Curl, because Cam Curl came in and balled out. So like I said, I think that we need a free safety as far as a schematic fit. We just need a more rangier player. Now, like I said, we may get off Landon Collins' contract, whether that be, him packaged in a deal with, one of these quarterbacks we're looking for, or whether that mean he just be, outright cut and we take that hit to the cap. That would be a huge hit as far as dead money to the cap. But I don't see a scenario where Landon Collins starts over Cam Curl if he comes back healthy next season. It can't happen. It can't happen. Cam Curl was the best rookie safety in the NFL this season. Those guys don't lose their jobs. They don't, especially in the 7th round on a bargain contract with a 7th round contract. Those guys don't lose So I think, Landon, I'm sorry. Like I said, I love Landon, but Landon might be getting the short end of the stick in this offseason as far as, his future as a Washington football team player. So like I said, guys, this was just simply a defensive outlook. We'll be looking more at draft prospects for both the linebacker and the safety position as we get closer to the draft. Be on the lookout for our next episode. We're going to be talking more about our off-season outlook. We're going to be having, mock off-season where I'll be the GM. Jalen will be the GM, talking about players that he'll be looking to bring in to fit schemes, and contracts, players that I'll be looking to release. And things like that. So we'll be giving you an off-season mock draft episode coming up soon. We'll also be giving you, like I said, draft coverage, free agency coverage. Like I told you guys in episode 1, everything Washington football team, Bleeding BnG is your new source for it. So what I need you guys to do is I need you guys to follow us on our Twitter and our Instagram. I'm going to be leaving those tags for my YouTube family on the video at the end of the video. For my people that's listening podcast only, our Twitter page is at Bleeding BnG, and that's BLEEDIN BnG. And then our Instagram page is a tad bit different. That one is at Bleeding BnG, and that one is BLEEDING BnG. And then we're available on all podcast platforms, Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. And I appreciate you guys listening to the 3rd episode of Bleeding BnG. Please be on the lookout for more content coming soon.